Hi, Misha here, and it's actually already been just about a year since I've done a video on the Czech Vz.58, and I just really like talking about this gun. In fact, when we kind of snuck out and did a little bit of shooting right around the Thanksgiving holiday, I packed this one, but due to family obligations and losing daylight because, well, it's wintertime, we weren't able to run any rounds through it. Very sad, but yeah, next time I'll throw it in. And this is a gun that I've been interested in for a long time. Really, about the time I discovered AKs, I discovered this weird guy because I always had an appreciation for Czech guns, and I very quickly, early in my gun career as an adult, picked up a Vz.52 pistol and a Vz.52 rifle. This was long before the Vz.82s even came in, and I just had an appreciation for the design aesthetic and their independence and kind of that weird. There's a very Germanic way the Czechs do guns, but there's also a dash of pragmatism, simplicity from kind of the Russian side of things. And this shouldn't surprise us, considering these are the folks that gave us the Bren, quite possibly the best light machine gun of World War II. So, yeah, not to mention the Vz.24 8mm Mauser, which was actually my first 8mm bolt action I ever bought for myself. I wasn't originally setting out to make a Czech collection. It's just, at that day and time, late 90s, early 2000s, that's kind of the best you could get, at least in my neck of the woods. So I always thought the Vz.58 was interesting. And as I've told many times, as soon as the D-Technic guns were imported in 2006 by Century, I did not even have to call and order them. My Century sales rep knew me, and he called me the moment they were available. I don't think they even were quite ready for shipping yet, but when he saw them getting checked in, checked in. See, I made a funny. He gave me a ring, and those were pure sporters. They came in with actually quite good skeletonized stocks. They had the original barrel with a extension cap on the end, and they had a single stack magwell. And I learned so much about the design as I basically fuddled around and figured out how to convert it into something more military. And from there, we've had a lot of good guns. They've been marketed under various brand names, including CZ USA. I think Waffenwerks had some. But at the end of the day, it's the company we know as Checkpoint USA that's kind of always been behind these guns coming in, at least after Century very quickly dropped them. So really, Checkpoint USA. And just in case I forget, D-Technic was the original name. It was changed about a decade ago to Czech Small Arms CSA, for pretty obvious reasons. It's more distinctive, and yeah. So with that, I don't know, let's just talk about the gun, because I really enjoy it. And I've actually done what I have been able to kind of spread the love of this gun. In fact, I sent one to Rob Ski, which, as far as I know, he's still loving. Sent one to Chris Bartacci, and sent one to Henry at 9-hole, and anyone else like that. Plus, I've carried them in the shop ever since they came in, and knock on table, I've yet to have a disappointed customer. I've had a few guys that said, hey, it's a great gun, but it's just not for me. You know, that happens because it is a little bit of a small gun. And I do want to talk about why in this video. So for bigger guys, that may not be the thing. And it's not meant to be a long-range accuracy shooter. No, it was designed from the get-go for a different purpose, and to replace really two different types of guns in the Czech military. So yeah, let's hang out for a bit and talk about some cool combat Cold War guns. Why not? Vz.58, just because I wanted to. Now, the production model was chambered for 7.62 by 39, and up until the 21st century, when some for commercial markets were chambered for 5.56, that was basically the only caliber. However, this gun's roots date back to the days when Czechoslovakia introduced what was at the time Z50 cartridge, 7.62 by 45, later just adopted as 7.62 by 45 CZ. Originally, this was kind of a complement to the Carbine, the self-loading Carbine with the 20-inch barrel, known as the Vz.52. This was an open bolt gun, really classed as a submachine gun, and the early prototypes were known as the CZ515 or 51.5, because it was a model of 1951, 5th iteration. They were open bolt because that's what the Czech military thought they wanted, but after testing they realized, yeah, maybe not. It doesn't overheat as much, it does select fire, but the accuracy was kind of meh. So the next version, the CZ522, 52.2 from 1952, went to a closed bolt system and a hammer fired system. Now these are still on machined receivers and feeding from 30 round steel magazines. And this version was tested most notably in 1954, and while it was obvious that it wasn't perfected and ready for full production yet, it showed a lot of promise. And that wasn't just the Czechs saying. That was Russian observers, because the Russians were there. Czechoslovakia's position, obviously by this point they were fully communist and pretty much under the thumb, but this was pre-Warsaw Pact being signed. But in 1954, Russia was really pushing its client states to adopt its guns and its cartridges, all that good stuff. So they had observers there, and even they had to admit that the CZ522 was pretty darn promising. Now keep in mind, in 1954, the AK Type 3 really had just been introduced. So the AK was pretty new and really wasn't being made outside of Russia yet. Very soon it would be. But at this time, the AK itself, today we think of it as an assault rifle, but back in the 50s, that term was very new, and many people just lumped the AK in as a submachine gun. And similarly, the new CZ design was, chunked into that. Anyway, in 1955, several things happened. The Warsaw Pact came together. Russia insisted that Czechoslovakia drop 7.62 by 45 and go to 7.62 by 39. And the various private gun factories and design organizations in Czechoslovakia were combined or disbanded. This became a new conglomerate under the communists known as Constructa Brno, which, rolled what we know CZ today, Strakonis factory, into the Brno factory, becoming one big thing. And so most of the workers were transferred there in the mid-50s. Now, the design would stall for a minute because Russia took their sweet-ass time getting specifications to manufacture 7.62 by 39 ammunition over to the Czechs. So it kind of just sat around until 1956. At that time, the first version for that cartridge was released, the SA-56, and it was tested, and it was doing really well. It was closed bolt, but there was still one major round of improvements left, which would result in the SA-58, which is almost what we have here. With the SA-58, and we'll talk more in just a minute about requirements for these, they went away from the hammer-fired system to a striker system, or if you must, a linear hammer system. They also added more lightning cuts to the receiver, and when they went to the new firing system, they were able to go to a smaller receiver, even though it's machined, not stamped. They also switched from steel magazines to aluminum alloy, which, to be fair, Russia experimented with too, the waffle mags. But unlike Russia, the Czechs had great success. This would go through testing in 1958, and then would be adopted as the SA Vzor or Vz.58 late that year, and then would be put into production in 1959. By the way, the prototypes were known as the Broom from 1956 through 1958. I don't know. It's kind of funny. They're kind of like trench broom. That. So with that, yeah, let's talk about what this was meant to do in the Czechoslovakian military. Here we have the Vz.58 infantry rifle, self-loading carbine. Now, I've done several videos on this gun already, and the 7.62x45 version had already given way to the 7.62x39 version. This used a detaching 10-round mag. It could be topped off by chargers, stripper clips, has a fixed charging handle, full wood stock, and a folding, relatively lightweight bayonet, which I've noticed is very hard to fold back with one hand. So one sec here. It's a neat bayonet for what it is. But this gun was pretty big and heavy and pretty resource intensive to produce. It was about 9.5 pounds unloaded, measured about 39.5 inches long, and had a 20.5 inch barrel. And it was rather complicated and convoluted in a lot of ways. And that was certainly one gun the new Vz.58 was meant to replace. It is quite a bit lighter, though, at about 6.4 to 6.5 pounds, depending on the furniture type. As is famously known, originally this had nice beechwood, hardwood furniture, but soon they would go to this wood chip polymer mix furniture, and there are several minor variants. There are some that are almost solid looking, that basically use sawdust, and there's some that are more textured and chunky. These are the beaver bark looking ones that use larger wood chips. This stuff is actually very durable. Good stuff. Overall length, as we see it here, is about 33.5 inches, not counting the break. And this had a 15.4 inch barrel. Quite a bit lighter, 3 pounds lighter, and yeah, quite a bit shorter. In fact, this gun, with its bayonet attached, and this bayonet actually attaches in a pretty cool way. Even the bayonet was designed to be lightweight. In fact, this was the bayonet that would inspire the one on the Bayonet RK62 a short time later. Anyway, it latches on under the block here. It's kind of a unique way of doing it. But when this is on, the overall length is still shorter than the Vz.52, 57 here. No, I found that kind of interesting. And yeah, it goes on, works well as a combat knife, which is really what it was intended for. Leather, lightweight leather scabbard. Here's the cleaning kit. Now with the 52, the cleaning kit can go on the stock. Of course, with the 58, because of the design, there's no room in the stock, so this had to be carried in a pouch or sack. And they would typically issue a 4-cell mag pouch. And the mags are lightweight alloy because they really were trying to save weight, but they didn't want to sacrifice too much in the way of range. They still wanted this to be a good long-range rifle if possible. Now, of course, it does lock open on a empty magazine, and it can be topped off by 10-round stripper clips. Now these look very similar to SKS clips, but they are actually slightly different because Czechoslovakia never adopted the SKS. And of course it will stay open even after you pull the mag out, because it does have a device to let it go forward. Just do that. And there's even a manual hold open if you need to here. If I don't knock you over. Right there, under the controls, there's a latch here. So there's a hold open latch, but to release it, just do that. And the mags are rock and lock style, but they're kind of smooth compared to, say, an AK. And the catch is more shielded with the trigger guard. This is a stamped trigger guard. The receiver is machined steel. Top cover is stamped. Now, a lot of people think of a machined or milled receiver as being heavy, but because of the firing system and the lightning cuts, it's actually quite lightweight. And you might wonder, why didn't they just go to a stamped receiver? Well, if they were intending to produce in the tens of millions like Russia was with the AKM, that might have been economically viable. But in the 1950s, getting a stamped receiver line up and running was pretty time and resource intensive. And the Czechoslovakians weren't sure how many of these they were going to make. Probably hundreds of thousands, not millions or tens of millions. So sticking with machining for their needs was probably a pretty economical choice. At any rate, this was about a kilogram lighter than the AK-47 and about a pound lighter than the later AKM, so they still managed to save weight a great deal. It also has a much better safety. Horizontal is fire, down is safe. On a military gun, you could flip it back further for the third position, but of course this being a semi-auto. The barrel does not have a cleaning rod mounted under it, again to kind of save weight. Instead you have a sectional cleaning rod in here. It was cold hammer forged and chrome lined. You do have a protected front sight. The early ones were open topped, kind of AK style. Later ones would be fully enclosed. It's threaded 14mm, but whereas the AK is 14mm left hand, this is 14mm right hand. Like I said, it has a fixed handle and pretty ergonomic pistol grip, but it is small. Now again, it does have quite a nice trigger, at least I think so. It's a military trigger, but quite nice. With that, we can look at the gas piston. One thing I think they learned from the 52 is to make disassembly a lot easier on this gun. You just pop that out. This one's a little stiff. I think I might wait till the other one, guys. Yeah, that might be easier. I forget how stiff this one is. I actually don't know why it is. It's the only one I've ever had that is stiff, but so it goes. Yeah. I'll do it on the second one. But the gas pistons under there. There is a second takedown pin back here. This one's not as stiff. And they are captive, so you're not going to lose them in the field. They really learned something. So yeah, this was meant with the fixed stock version, known as the Vz.58P. It was to replace the Vz.52 rifle, as well as the Vz.52, 57 light machine gun in some instances, whereas others would be replaced by the Vz.59, the UK-59 general purpose machine gun. So this was kind of the one side of thing that these were intended for. However, all that compactness and lightweight really shows where it was made to fulfill its other role. SA-26. Here we have the other major version, the Vz.58V. Specifically, the SA Vz.58V. And the SA in the name actually stands for submachine gun, which this was in some ways classed as. And this was one of the guns it was meant to replace. The SA, well, this is in 24 configuration. If you have the folding stock on it, it's a SA-26. Quick change stock design held in by a screw. This fired at 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. Was about 27 inches long, but interestingly it was heavier at about 7.5 pounds with the wood stock, maybe slightly lighter with the metal folder, and fed from a 32 round stick mag. A good submachine gun, at least some aspects of it, but dated, and they were hoping that their submachine guns could be replaced by the same kind of rifle. So it has a folding stock. Set you down if I can't do this by hand. I'm having a great hand day. Now it's good to have a stock that's actually on the stiff side versus wiggly jiggly. In fact, I intentionally tightened it up. There's just a button underneath the fold. And if you notice, this stock is very much like the one from the submachine gun, at least the arm is. This has a more ornate folding butt plate. This is literally just a piece of steel. So, of course, the overall length is the same, 33.5 inches with the stock deployed, but with it folded, it actually compacts down to right at 25 inches. So it's only slightly longer than the submachine gun, and we still are retaining a 15.4 inch barrel, 30 round magazine, and we're firing a more powerful cartridge. So in most every other way, it's a great thing, and this is why they wanted it to be as compact and light as possible so it could take over the submachine gun role. By the way, now I can pop off this tube. Sorry about the other one being stiff. I need to do something about it one day. See, this should just pull right out. Take this top off. And here we see the short stroke gas piston. This piston is chrome plated for ease of cleaning. And it acts just like you would expect it to. Charge the weapon. Where did I put you? Open there, piston there. Of course, when you press the piston, it comes back and strikes the bolt carrier. It does have a return spring, and it's easy to take out if you need to get rid of it. Cleaning, just pulls right out and just kind of sits in here. Again, couldn't be easier. By the way, this one does have the beechwood furniture, hardwood. And what's nice is, unlike with the AK and many other guns, pops right on. you can easily switch between stocks. There's one big screw that holds it in, so you use the same receiver. You just need to change out with a couple of screwdrivers. Removing the folding stock is exceedingly easy. There's just one screw right here. The fixed stock has a few more screws to remove, and it's a little bit more convoluted, but still not bad. Still goes on quite easily. Again, the mags come in and out so nice on these. These are such smooth guns. This one has the enclosed front sight. Notice both of mine do have the lightning cuts. Some versions don't. This one does not have the bayonet lug, but it does have the muzzle brake pinned on to give it a legal overall length. Disassembly is easy. Now you do want to uncock it, and then you just have another pin in the back. Yeah, now this one's going to be stiff in the back. Comes out, it's captive. Oh, it's kind of neat. Again, learning lessons from the Vz.58. The springs are captive, and they're all part of this unit. The lower one's for the striker annular hammer in there. Bolt comes out very normal. Bolt group, I should say. It's all this one nice unit here. And it's a very neat system. Here's our striker. And your bolt actually never tilts or tips up or down, which keeps it very much in alignment. Instead, you have this wedge back here to lock it. And you have a spring-loaded firing, or a free-floated firing pin. It is a two-piece design. It's pretty simple and quite effective. And again, we have a machined receiver, even if it's lightweight. This is where the bolt locks in here. Pretty simple inside. And simple is often very good when it comes to military guns. So I would say, unlike certain guns, M14, this actually did a very good job of replacing the self-loading carbine, the full-size submachine gun, and even some of the light machine guns, but not all. So combined with the later UK-59 and the later Vz.61 Scorpion, which acted more as a PDW, the Czechs were quite well armed, although, you know, they had certain doctrines that may be different from the West. Vz.58 never disappoints. For the Czech army, the Vz.58 was certainly a winner. They would produce about 920,000 over a 25-year production run, ending only in 1984. They would also export this to a number of nations. They had been happy with the Vz.52, so Cuba also purchased the Vz.58. And they would turn up in places like Vietnam, Iraq, even India, and some other unaligned or third world, if you prefer, nations would purchase these. Considering the relatively small production scheme, it got around because it was a good military gun. Lightweight, dependable, probably not as durable as an AK, as bulletproof as an AK, but these alloy mags work better than you'd think. Now, of course, you know that this doesn't take AK mags. A big part of it is, if it did, the bolt hold open wouldn't work. Another thing, the Czechs really wanted to save weight. And third, When this was created, the AK mag wasn't the standard at the time. When this was really being developed, the AK was only starting to be manufactured outside of Russia. So it wasn't that crazy. Anyway, they made a good mag for it, but this was the only one they ever made, the 30 rounder. There was never a 20 rounder. All that good stuff. And the design remained relatively unchanged. Like I said, the furniture would be wood or the beaver barf. You would have that front sight. There would be 3 major versions. These 2 plus 1 without the lightning cuts. The front sling swivel would change. This one has the T-shaped stamped one. This one has the keychain style. The gas block would also change a little bit. One noticeable one, the mag catch would change. This one here has kind of the earlier style with the catch that kind of comes right up against the trigger guard. Later they would go to this kind of forked style. The catch is a little smaller, maybe slightly harder to get to, but it's better protected. It's not a big deal one way or the other, really. So you do see that. There's also a few minor differences in lightning cuts on the military guns. Not so much, of course, on the semi-autos. And the bolt group would change a little bit here or there. Things of that nature. They would, in the military, have this kind of baking lacquer finish. Sometimes it was more gray. Sometimes it was more black over different production runs. But it was always this lacquer type finish, which, you know, we can just call paint, but it's really a good finish. What I like about it is it's almost like a self-lubricating surface. It really lets the parts move smoothly, the bolt throw, that kind of thing. Yeah, a really good military gun. But what about civilian hands in the USA? Again, when I got into guns as an adult, there were virtually no Vz.58 semi-autos, but happily over the past 15 years, it's become, if not a common thing, at least a relatively well-known thing. We found a loose 1 round on the table, and one of the advantages of the Vz, you can just top it up from the top. Never done. Now, I'm not going to go into all of them. I've done that in previous videos. There was the Ohio Ordnance Works builds before the Detectant guns, but those are really expensive. The Detectant started to come in, like I said, in 2006, and then the various Checkpoint and CZ USA branded ones, they all came from the Detectant Czech Small Arms factory. And of course there was the Century Arms Vz.58. And I've said in multiple videos that if you can, get the Czech import. It's not so much that the Century version is bad, but it takes away. What's so nice about the imports and the original guns is how smooth they are. The bolt throw, the trigger is quite nice. You get the Century guns, the trigger's heavier, and they have a very basic phosphate finish, which just makes everything grittier. And of course they're built from used parts, and they're built with a US-made, non-chrome lined, button rifled barrel. Now they are with 16-inch barrels. Originally, the Czech imports came with the 15.4-inch barrel, but of course, like I said, I had to have a small extension put on, or like these, they took the extension off and installed the so-called beer can muzzle brake to get over 16 inches. But once they started to run out of original barrels, they did start shipping them with 16.1-inch barrels. They were still cold hammer forged and chrome lined, but they were made by Lothar Walther in Germany. According to Czech Small Arms, they actually did make some more new production 16-inch barrels in the Czech Republic, but they found that the German barrels were more accurate. So, yeah, why not? Either way, the imports have high-quality barrels. They're built on true machined, milled receivers, and they don't have the gremlin, which is an issue that you can find in the Century guns. and they've done tons of builds. Now this one is a import. This one up here was actually one that Checkpoint assembled in the USA using an original kit with original barrel and on an original Czech receiver. The receivers are just brought over as stripped receivers, and then Checkpoint assembled them here using tooling and know-how given to them by CSA. So that's an option you can do. I kept one of these years ago because it was the only way to get the Bayonet lug back then. Now newer Czech imports are shipping with the Bayonet lug under here, but for years the ATF wouldn't let them do that because of reasons. But yeah, if you picked up a Century Vz.58, I'm not saying it's a bad gun, and if you have one, I'm very pleased you enjoy it. However, if you like that, you'll love one of the real imports. It's just like anything else. A parts kit build, it's just not as good. For one thing, they're built from used parts, but you know, Century Arms is typical Century Arms quality. One of these, they're just so smooth. Don't know. It's just a brilliant design, lightweight, and a lot of fun. But that's if you're kind of going into it from a CQB shooting point of view. If you are a long-range target shooter, you're not. This isn't really the gun for you, frankly. It's not designed for long distance. Of course, 760x39 isn't the best cartridge for that in the first place. Also, of course, the original stock is typical Warsaw length, and the handguards are relatively small and thin because, yeah, when they designed this, they were thinking more about size and compactness. It will heat up if you rapid fire. It does cool quite quickly, but it will heat up with rapid fire, so that's just something to kind of note. And it does take its own proprietary mags, which they're not expensive, but they're not near as cheap and available as, say, those for the AK, for the Kalashnikov. And that kind of goes for the rest of the parts here. Luckily, parts kits are still very available. So if you do get one, you can always just grab a parts kit for about 100, 150 bucks. Maybe 200, and get spare springs and all that. And the nice thing is most all the components, even to make it a semi-auto, are just modified original. They don't have a lot of totally new proprietary, because from the beginning this was of course a closed bolt select fire gun in the military. So to make it semi-auto, they simply remove the full auto bits and bobs inside. Again though, if you do get a parts kit, remember, the barrel is 390 millimeters, so it's under that magic number. Like I said, I have really no new info. There hasn't been any really cool new releases in the Vz.58 world. In fact, it's been very quiet, but it's just one of those guns I've got to get out now and again and shoot because I love the mechanics of it. I love the feel of it. Heck, I'd even say I love the look of it. Yeah, I know. Moving on. It's just one of those guns that delights me. And in fact, Czech guns are kind of like that. They have a certain design aesthetic, a certain feel. Like the 805 brand, the brand 2, the Vz.61 Scorpion, the Vz.82 pistol. I really like their aesthetics. Now, it's not always a winner. The Vz.52 Carbine, and the SA-24-26 submachine gun, it's neat, but it does have some quirks. And quite frankly, the Vz.52 pistol, I think, is probably more of a miss than a hit. But hey, no one gets it right all the time. But I think with the Vz.58, they really did. And this is why it was so beloved in the Czech military. And it took a lot of effort to finally replace this with the Bren. And that wasn't until 2011, and really it took up until about 2020 to fully replace it. So it was in service for a good half century there. And they have a very positive attitude about it. Of course, they were popular in Canada, at least up until their rules and regs changed. My only complaint is I wish there were more variants. This is pretty much it. The 58P and the 58V. There is a version called the 58PI that has a scope mount. It's a dovetail style for infrared and night vision. But those are the only 3 versions that were mass produced, and the 58PIs were produced in quite small numbers. The LMG version, while prototyped, never went into production, and while you can find shorter barrel versions at Checkpoint, those are for the commercial market, and I'm pretty much for the military. Plus, frankly, it's small and light enough as it is. But yeah, just something I wanted to talk about. Again, nothing new, but I'm sure you're the same way. We all have our favorite guns, and sometimes we just gotta haul them out of the safe and mess around with them, don't we? Because yeah, they bring us joy, and that's kind of what it's all about, isn't it, guys? So with that, I'd love to hear about your own Vz.58s or just any of those guns that you particularly like. I mean, talk in the comments. Hope everyone's having a good December holiday season. What do you want Gun Santa to bring you this year? If you could, please comment, and if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to the Patreon page. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon next time.